Part 15. Complicated Love. Ginny, who was busy in the kitchen, suddenly stopped after hearing her doorbell ring. With her hands still wrapped in flour, she walked towards her door. "Are you guys looking for Lisa?" Ginny asked after opening the door and looking at Jisoo and Sumi, who were standing right in front of her. "Maybe Sumi is looking for sister, but I'm looking for you," Jisoo replied with a warm smile. "Sumi, sorry, but Lisa is not at home. Just wait inside. I have to go back to the kitchen," says Ginny. "Welcome." Jisoo and Sumi just smiled, then entered, and Ginny went back to the kitchen because she still had a lot to do there. "Jenny, do you need help?" asked Jisoo, who was behind Ginny. "No need," Ginny answered, who only glanced at Jisoo. Jisoo chose to sit at the dining table chair while looking at Ginny, who was busy again with the frying pan. She looked very hot because her sweat was dripping non-stop from her forehead. "Jenny, are you sick?" asked Jisoo, looking closely at Ginny's face. "No, I'm just hot. Why are you sitting there?" Jenny asked with a cynical look. "You look sick, and it's not hot in here either. How can you be hot?" asked Jisoo, surprised. "Go away, don't bother me," replied Ginny, who doesn't like Jisoo to be there. "Ginny, I don't think big sister treats you well until you go to the trouble of cooking and doing housework like this," Jisoo said, ignoring Ginny's words. "This is my duty and also my own will, so don't have anything to do with Lisa," Jenny replied, annoyed. Ginny, who wanted to take a step to get something, suddenly felt heavy on her head. She immediately held the table while closing her eyes to catch her breath. "Ginny, are you all right? I told you you were sick. Come on, take a break," Jisoo commanded while holding Ginny's arms. "I am all right," Ginny replied, and immediately removed Jisoo's hand roughly from her arm. "Please get out of here. I'm left alone," continued by Jenny. "No, I will still be here to help you," Jisoo's heart. Meanwhile, outside the house, Lisa had just arrived and immediately got out of her car. He paused for a moment to stare at the car, which was none other than Jisoo, then continued his steps into his. "What are you doing here? Where is Jisoo?" asked Lisa with a look of dislike. "You're back, Lisa," said Sumi, smiling. "Jisoo and I just wanted to visit here, and Jisoo was in the kitchen helping Ginny," she continued with his sweet smile. Not wanting to ignore Sumi, Lisa rushed to the kitchen. Jisoo was seen, who kept watching Ginny, who was cleaning the kitchen utensils. "Lisa, you're back," Ginny reprimanded after hearing the sound of water pouring into the glass on the dining table. Lisa just kept quiet and took a sip of the water in the glass, then put her empty glass down and even deliberately banged it on the table, making a loud sound, and then left. "I told you she never treated you well," said Jisoo, who was full of emphasis after seeing Lisa's attitude in front of him. "That's none of your business, and you interfere too much with ours," replied by Ginny furiously. Ginny took off the apron that was still attached to her body and then rushed away from there, her eyes cynically looking at Jisoo. "Lisa, have you finished your business at the office?" Ginny asked, looking at her husband, who was sitting staring out his bedroom window. Lisa was silent while Ginny, who was silent, immediately sighed. She grumbled, annoyed that Lisa suddenly silenced her like that. She then left and Lisa glanced at her leaving. Not long after Ginny left, Lisa followed her and just came out. Lisa saw his wife was silent, clutching something on the stairs with her eyes closed and her face was pale. "What happened to you? Are you sick?" Lisa asked worriedly while holding Ginny's shoulder with her hands. Even her eyes were watching his wife's face so closely. "I'm fine. Let go," Ginny asked by brushing Lisa's hand off her shoulder. "Ginny, I told you earlier, you are sick and you need a break. Why are you so stubborn?" said Jisoo, who was already among them. "Come on, I'll take you to the room," invite Lisa gently without paying attention to Jisoo, who looks at her annoyed. "No need, I can do it myself," denied Ginny, then leave from there, leaving both of them. "Your wife is sick, so you don't know what kind of husband you are," said Jisoo. "Can you shut up?" presses Lisa with her sharp gaze, then follows Ginny. Lisa, who was already in the room, saw Ginny lay down. She even closed his eyes. Lisa immediately walked over to her and took some tissue from his place. Lisa rubbed Ginny's forehead very gently because it looked wet and covered in her own sweat. Ginny, who had just closed her eyes, suddenly opened again. "What are you doing here?" asked Ginny, who was still annoyed with Lisa. Lisa was just silent as she put her hand on Ginny's forehead, but she didn't feel anything there. Lisa thought that his wife had a fever. "Go on, I want to rest," Jenny asked, then turned her back to Lisa. "Okay," Lisa replied, then she went to sit on the sofa and watched Ginny from there. The night came. Ginny was very difficult to close her eyes. Feeling uncomfortable, suddenly the ringing of his cell phone rang. She sat up to take his call. "Hello, Jenny." "Yes, Mom. What's the matter at this time of night calling? Can you sleep here tonight, girl? Mommy miss you so much." "Mommy, it's already midnight. How about tomorrow morning?" Ginny goes there to accompany Mommy. "But Mammy misses you so much, girl." Ginny was silent for a moment. She was surprised by her Mammy's attitude, but hearing her mother's trembling voice, she couldn't refuse her request. "Okay, Mommy." Ginny will get ready to go to Mammy's house now. After saying that, Ginny ended the call. She got ready, then went out of her room to the living room to meet her husband, who was still awake staring at his laptop screen. "Lisa, can I borrow your car?" Ginny asked after sitting next to Lisa, who looked serious doing something on her laptop. "Where are you going in the middle of the night like this?" Lisa asked, surprised, looking at Ginny, who was still staring at her. "I want to go to Mommy's house," answered Jenny. "Tomorrow, you are unwell and the night wind will make things worse for you," said Lisa softly. "But Mammy asked me to accompany her tonight. May I borrow your car for a moment? Tomorrow morning I will return it," said Ginny sadly. "Okay, but I'll deliver," Lisa replied, who immediately closed her laptop without turning it off first. "No, I'm going alone. I don't want to bother you." Ginny refused to look at her husband, who had stood up from his seat. "Then don't go," said Lisa, sitting back down. All right, come on, take me now," said Ginny, who immediately stood up and pulled Lisa's hand. They left. When they got there, they saw Ginny's mom sitting on the terrace of her house. Jenny, who saw her mother, immediately rushed to open the car door and walked quickly to her mother. "Gosh, Mommy, Why is Mommy outside? Ginny asked in surprise as she put a scarf around her mother's neck, which she took off from her neck when she got out of the car. Mommy misses you so much, son, said his mother, who immediately hugged Ginny's body so tightly. Mommy, Ginny, right, yesterday from here. Time to miss Ginny again. And Mammy can wait inside the house too. What if Mammy is sick? The night wind is not very good for Mammy. Ginny kept on talking until she didn't give any pause. Lisa, who was already among them, could only pay attention to his wife, who was so concerned about her mother. Basic child Mommy is very chatty, said Ginny mother while pinching her daughter's nose so excitedly. Ginny told her mother to come in fast and turned her body to look at her husband, who was still standing there. Lisa, thanks for dropping me off. You can go back home, Jenny said, looking at Lisa's face. You're so good at talking. What do you think the distance from home to here is? Close? I'll sleep here, Lisa replied with a crooked smile. Yeah, let's go in, invite Jenny. They both entered the house, and their Mommy Ginny was still standing looking at Jenlisa, who had just entered and looking at her in surprise. Lisa, tonight, I borrowed your wife first, okay? Mammy really wanted to sleep with her only one night, said Ginny mother, smiling at her daughter-in-law. Yes, Mommy, hurry up and sleep. It's almost morning, Lisa replied, while gently stroking Ginny's mum's arm. Lisa walked up the stairs. She would sleep upstairs while Ginny and her mother were downstairs. Ginny, who just wanted to close her eyes, suddenly opened because she was a little surprised. How could she not? Her mother suddenly hugged her from the side. Ginny, Mommy loves you so much, son, said her mother softly and hugged Ginny's body tightly. Ginny also really loves Mommy, Ginny replied softly while stroking her mother's back. Jen, you now have a good husband. Mammy hope you can continue with her, asked Ginny mother, by looking at Ginny's face and placing her palm on Ginny's cheek. Yes, Mommy, Ginny answered, with a sad look, but still showed her smile. Jen, this world is not something eternal, so anything it can be destroyed, whether it's feelings, property, throne, and even life. Don't you ever cry over something that has been destroyed and doesn't. Yes, Mommy, Ginny knows we should sleep now, okay? In the morning we will continue tomorrow, coaxed Ginny gently. Yes, girl, Mommy loves you very much, said his mother, then kissed Ginny's forehead. Ginny also loves Mommy very, very much, Ginny replied, smiling, and hugged her mother's body tightly, then fell asleep together. The next morning, sunlight refracted the window of Ginny mother's room so that Ginny, who was still sleeping, was dazzled by it. Ginny woke up and saw her mother, who was still fast asleep. Ginny smiled, looking at her mother's face that looked so beautiful. She kissed her forehead, then slowly walked away. Ginny left the room after cleaning herself. Then she headed to the kitchen to make breakfast for Mommy and her husband. She suddenly stopped because she saw her husband sitting on the sofa. Lisa, it turns out you're awake too, Ginny said, smiling, looking at Lisa, who was sitting on the sofa. Yeah, you're going to make breakfast. Want me to help? Asked Lisa, turning to Ginny. No need to, just sit there. Let me prepare everything, replied Ginny, walked away from there. After preparing everything on the dining table, Ginny returned to her mother's room. Looks like his mother is still sleeping in the same position. Mommy, called Ginny while gently touching her mother's shoulder. Mommy, let's get up. It's already morning. Let's have breakfast first, she said again. Mom, called Ginny again, but there is no response at all from her mother. Ginny looked closely at her mother's face. Trembling, she stuck her finger closer to her nostrils, but no breath was wasted there. Jenny's eyes widened instantly. She tried to touch her mother's chest again, but the same thing happened. Her mother's heart didn't beat at all. Mommy, come on, wake up, calls Ginny in a loud voice while rocking her mother's body. Mommy, wake up quickly, don't joke, Ginny doesn't like it like this, Jenny shouted with bloodshot eyes holding back her tears. Mommy, wake up, Jenny screamed louder. Lisa, who was in the front room, slightly sharpened her hearing. When she heard his wife scream again, she immediately rushed over to her. Ginny, what's wrong? Why are you shouting? Asked Lisa, surprised. Lisa, please wake up my mommy. Please wake up, Ginny asked hysterically, pulling Lisa's hand towards her mother. Ginny, calm down for a second, Lisa shouted while holding Ginny's arms and looking at his wife's face. Ginny was silent and Lisa held Ginny's mother's wrist. She was silent for a moment, then looked at Ginny so deeply. Lisa, mommy. Ginny, mommy is gone, Lisa said slowly and still with the same look. No, it's impossible, Ginny shouted, who suddenly fell to the floor. Her heart seemed to be stabbed with a live bullet. Her chest felt so tight. Ginny recalled her childhood with her mother. Ginny's eyes reddened with tears. She wanted to cry, however, she remembered his mother's words last night. Lisa sat cross-legged closer to Ginny. However, suddenly Ginny's vision was blurry. Her neck seemed to be hit by a rock and suddenly she was unconscious and Lisa immediately caught her wife's body. Ginny, calls Lisa by patting his wife's cheek trying to wake her up, but Ginny doesn't wake up at all. Lisa decided to lift her wife's body and lay her down on the bed, then took her cell phone and called all her family and closest relatives. A few hours later, Ginny's house was full of people, and soon Ginny blinked and she saw Rose right above her face. Ginny immediately sat up. Jen, you are patient. You still have me? Rose said while hugging Ginny's body and crying in her friend's arms. Ginny just stayed silent with her blank stare. She didn't even return his friend's hug. Ginny slightly pushed Rose's body slowly, then got out of bed. She left the room and saw her mother's corpse lying lifeless there. Mommy, thank you for giving birth to me. I was very lucky to have been born from your womb. If Mommy meets Daddy there, convey my longing greetings to her. I love you very much, Ginny thought. Not long after that, everyone took Mammy Ginny to her final resting place. After that, Ginny sat dreamily in the living room chair with her gaze still blank. There was still Rose. Lisa, who had just returned from the funeral, went straight to her wife and sat beside her and then held Ginny's hand quite tightly. Why isn't he crying at all? Lisa thought, looking worriedly at his wife's face. Ginny, I'm so sorry, said Summy sadly, and just arrived with Jisoo, who also just arrived from the funeral. Sis, I've contacted Mummy, but it hasn't been connected since earlier, said Jisoo, looking at Lisa. Ginny, Mama is on my way back from Thailand. I want to tell you this sad news. And, Jisoo, and I have been trying to contact her ever since, but still can't, Lisa said softly. Don't tell Mama first. Later, when Mama is here, I'm afraid Mama will be disturbed and come to mind, Ginny answered slowly, with an unchanging gaze. Rose, you better go home, it's getting late, Ginny continued, looking at Rose. No, Jen, I want to stay with you here, Rose replied, with his eyes still swollen from crying all this time. But I want to be alone, said Ginny, who immediately got up from her seat without paying attention to all the gazes on her. Lisa followed his wife's footsteps from behind. His mind was still disturbed by Ginny, who didn't cry at all.